Hello, welcome back to my channel. My name is Nicole, and today I'm going to see if 15 minutes can get me a 5-star read. Now, let me explain how this is going to work. Each month for quite a while now, it seems like I have been doing a library challenge where I have basically been spending 15 minutes taste testing some books or sometimes some things I have gotten out of the library, and then I end up choosing one of those things to read or to interact with or whatever the case may be. And yeah, and then I review that thing or book for you. So this month I'm doing things a little differently. I did not use my spinner wheel or play a game to pick what I'm going to read. I started out with 10 things from the library. They were all books that I have on my unowned TBR that I thought I wanted to at least check out at the library, if not actually end up reading. I have taken that stack of 10 books. A whole handful of them are right here on my couch. And I have narrowed it down to 4 books that I think I might want to read, 4 books that I think might be a 5-star read for me. And what I'm going to do here with you is I'm going to try each of these books out for 15 minutes. I'm going to choose one of them to read. And if I know myself well enough, it might end up being 5 stars. I don't know. I don't know if you can actually pick out a 5-star book that way. I've never tried this. Lots of people on BookTube do the can I find a 5-star read, predicting a 5-star read, that kind of thing. That's what this is going to be. The first book I'm going to try out is by Alistair Reynolds, and this is House of Suns. So let me go ahead and set my phone timer for 15 minutes. And while I have my timer going, I will tell you, and while I read, I will tell you what this book is about. House of Suns is a science fiction book, and it is described as occurring 6 million years ago at the dawn of starfaring era. Abigail Gentian fractured herself into 1,000 male and female clones, which she called Shatterlings. She sent them out into the galaxy to observe and document the rise and fall of countless human empires. Since then, they gather every 200,000 years to exchange news and memories of their travels. But something has gone amiss with Abigail's grand plan. 2 of the clones, Campion and Purslane, have fallen in love and shared experiences in a way forbidden to Shatterlings. Now they are headed for the 32nd reunion, reluctantly, fearful that they will be punished or worse. Only there is no 32nd reunion. On the way, the 2 discover that someone is eliminating Gentian line. Most of the Shatterlings are already dead, and to save themselves, Campion and Purslane must join forces with those few who remain to determine exactly who or what their enemy is before they are wiped out of existence. Okay, time is up on book 1, which was House of Suns, and my thoughts so far. It's definitely going to be a slower paced novel, so I'm going to have to keep that in mind when I judge it against the other books, or at least that's the initial impression I get. So yeah, it seems like the type of science fiction I would like. It also seems like the type of book that I'm going to have to plan to read when I'm in the mood for it. And I don't know that I'm in the mood for a slower paced book, or at least a book that has a slower opening. It is going to be very interesting. There are already a couple of things that have happened. I read what I thought was chapter 1, but now that I'm thinking about it, it must be the prologue. It's some sort of prologue. It was the opening of part 1 of the book, and then when I finished that, I realized the next thing was chapter 1 in there. So I read, I don't know, the opening and part of chapter 1, maybe the first page, chapter 1, and the opening made sense to me and I thought it was really interesting. Some of what's happened in chapter 1 so far, I'm like, what are we talking about? What's going on? And some of that may just because we're so close to the beginning of chapter 1 that not everything that's going on in this new different situation is clear yet. I do have to say I really like the picture of whatever type of ship this is on the cover. But yeah, it's too hard for me to determine yet. I do like the writing style. I think it's going to be a little bit harder science fiction than I've read recently. It's definitely staying on my TBR whether or not it ends up being the book that I read at the end of all of this. So that's all I have to say about that so far. It's always hard with the first book because I have nothing to compare it to. So let's move on to the next book. So the next book I have to share is Atalanta. I'm really looking forward to this one. It's supposed to be a mythological retelling about Atalanta. It falls into sort of the Greek retelling mythology type modern day adventure stories that people seem to be writing. I became interested in this one mainly because of the seafaring adventure part of it. And I guess I'll just go ahead and start reading and tell you what this book is about. This covers the story of Princess Atalanta, who is born, and her parents give her up because she is not the gender child they want who's going to inherit the throne. And she ends up being raised by a mother bear and also being kept watch over by the goddess Artemis. She then later in life decides to go adventuring because she is wild at heart, and she goes on an adventure with Jason and the Argonauts, and they go on the search for the Golden Fleece. However, she is warned by Artemis that she should not fall in love and get married because that will be her undoing. And adventure and drama and love is what follows along the way. Okay, I finished, and I have to say right off the bat, this is the type of like captivating story that grabs you right from the beginning that I think I'm kind of in the mood for. So even though these are both books that I will keep on my TBR, I'm definitely ranking this higher than House of Suns. I really like the writing style. It's pretty simple and straightforward, but also like there's something slightly beautiful about it without it being super poetic or lyrical in its style. I definitely have that feeling of a myth or mythology and a personal story all at the same time. I love the wooded setting that this is taking place in. I made it through the prologue, which is, you know, where we hear the story of her being raised by a mother bear. And then I also started chapter 1, which is when she finally meets Artemis, and you get a little bit of a taste of Artemis and what she's like and her background, and also of her nymphs and Atalanta herself. But one of the other things I'm really enjoying about this book is I feel like that's all very naturally incorporated into the story. None of it is feeling like a info dump. And so that's really good. It makes me really hopeful that I'm going to get a lot of background about all of these characters and, you know, the Greek mythology surrounding them without like pages of just like information heavy writing. So yeah, so I'm a little bit more excited about that than I expected to be. And I can kind of see now why her other books, Electra and Ariadne, are so popular. I do feel like this is one of her works that I hear less about. I forget when this was published. Did this recently come out? It might have. Oh, 2023. So it's been out for a while. I'm surprised I haven't heard more about it, but I do feel like there are a lot of people who went really hard into the Greek mythology retellings and then maybe after a while started getting burnt out on them. So that may have something to do with it as well. I think I might be more into this story because I'm not going into it so much for the retelling part as for the sort of seafaring adventure slash love story slash who knows what. So that may help me in my journey. I don't know. But now I'm going to move on to the next book in the category. All right, my third book that I'm going to try out is Dinner with King Tut. This is by Sam Kean. This is a work of nonfiction, which I don't read that frequently, but I do want to find my niche in nonfiction, and this, regardless of niche or not, sounded really interesting. So I'm definitely looking forward to giving this particular book a try and see if this is the one that I want to read to completion. Okay, so if the last book was the type of fiction and adventure story I want to be reading, this is probably the type of nonfiction that I want to be reading. This book is so interesting. Even the subtitle is like, I don't know, just draws me in. It makes me start thinking and asking questions. The subtitle is How Rogue Archaeologists Are Recreating the Sights, Sounds, Smells, and Taste of Lost Civilizations. And that's what this whole book is about. It is told in two different styles. One is a nonfiction style where you are learning about the archaeology of ancient human civilizations, the sort of typical scientific digging in the dirt, as it repeatedly says. And then the other part that it's telling is taking these same ideas and putting them in a fictional, more novel type of story for you to truly be able to get into the idea of what is being described and discussed. And so I read the introduction to this book in the 15 minutes, and then also started the first part of the book, which happens or takes place, I guess, 75,000 years ago in Africa. And it starts with how the first set of human civilizations were starting. And surprisingly to me, it actually starts with the novelization part. And so we meet a young boy who is living with his sister and brother-in-law in a cave, and their area is currently in the middle of a very devastating drought. And so it just talks about, you know, where he's sleeping and the different difficulties they have during the middle of this one particular night. And then it segues, and I like the way the segues are managed in the book, because I was wondering what that was going to look like and if I was going to get to one in my 15 minutes, and I did. And you basically have little marks like that letting you know, hey, the story is stopping momentarily, we're moving on to something else. And then it switches from the story up here into the nonfiction part down here. And the nonfiction goes on to talk about the protagonist in the first story, Kayate. It goes to talk about the type of bedding he would have slept on. And it's your, I would say, almost typical nonfiction sort of archaeological explanation, where it gets into what the different layers of his bedding would have been made out of, and why those elements would be there. But it also goes a step further and tells us about a woman who was or is an archaeologist, and the work that she was doing with this ancient civilization, and how she kind of like really started exploring the idea that like beds and the idea of beds and bedding have been around for a very long time. And so it talks about how she decided, rather than just researching the type of beddings that ancient people would use, that she would actually run an experiment and have people try the bedding out to see if it was comfortable, to see like what the properties were of this bedding, and did they actually work the way that, you know, they were thinking they did. And so it was really fun to hear about her story, as well as to see all of those elements have appeared in the fictionalized story I was just reading. And it was also interesting to hear the author talk about how, even though this was a really interesting experiment that this woman ran, that it was just her archaeology that other archaeologists wanted to hear about. Like, they just wanted to hear her research about the bedding. They didn't actually want to hear about the experiment with the bedding that she ran. And the author is claiming and stating that this is an ongoing problem in archaeology, where there are people who are starting to explore the idea of, maybe we should not just dig up and talk about these things and talk about our research, but maybe we should actually also start experiencing what we're talking about. It's called experimental archaeology, but he also talks about how it could be called experiential archaeology, or living archaeology. And I just think it's such a cool idea. And I really like his writing style and the way he talked about it. And it's made me even more excited to read this book. Do I think it'll be a 5-star? I don't know. It's such a cool and like fascinating idea. I like what he's talking about. He's definitely trying to make this idea more mainstream, or at least make more people aware of it. It's obviously an area of archaeology that I think the author feels passionate about, and he's certainly trying to share that passion with the reader, which I like. So, oh, would I prefer to read this more than Atalanta? I don't know. I almost kind of feel like I should say yes, just because it's so different than anything else I've come across. And it's certainly different than what I typically read. So yeah, I'm going to put that as number 2, which means that everything is coming down to the final book. And finally, I have the last book I'm going to try out now. And going into this, I'm not going to lie, I was thinking that this is for sure going to be the book that I pick. We'll see if that remains true after I try it for 15 minutes, but it's This Princess Kills Monsters. This was recommended to me by a viewer during my reading sprints, and yeah, it does kind of sound right up my alley. It's fantasy, adventure, and humor. Those are all things that I like in fantasy, so we'll see if I like it in this particular book after reading it for 15 minutes. Okay, I did not finish that opening, and I'm sorry if you can hear music in the background. My neighbor is playing music really loudly for reasons I'm not sure why. But anyway, I did not finish the opening of this book because I don't need to. That was probably one of the funniest openings to a book I have read in a while, and I loved every second of it. So, I may or may not have mentioned in telling you what this book is about, which is a retelling of the Grimm's brothers, The 12 Huntsmen. And one of the things that I realized happens at the opening of this book is that the author, as the prologue, retells the story of the 12 hunters or the 12 huntsmen and retells the story as it's told today. I don't know anyone who is summarizing that story the way this author just did, but more people should. It was so funny. I was laughing to the point where like my eyes are watery. I almost started crying. Um, I have to make this number one, don't I? Like I have to I do have to read the rest of this book because even the way the prologue ends, it takes this twist that you're like, oh, okay, yeah, I want to know more. And like that was just the prologue. I want to know more. I want that tone to keep going. I want to read this book and I'm going to. That was so fun. Oh my gosh. Thank you for the recommendation because somebody did recommend this book to me. Like I said, they were like, oh, if that's what you like in your fantasy, I think you'll like this fantasy novel. I think I'm going to love this fantasy novel. I have never heard of this book until it was mentioned to me. And I don't know why that is. Like I don't feel like I've seen a lot of people talk about this book. When was this published? 2025. Were people talking about this last year and I just somehow missed that because I'm just not watching a lot of channels that talk a lot about fantasy? I don't know, maybe so. But I guess I'm also right in that I know the type of fantasy that I do enjoy, and I don't know what else to say other than I'm going to start this book today and I will come back when I'm done reading it and I will let you know how it goes and if it ended up getting 5 stars. But I can tell you right now, if the rest of the book is even close to the way this prologue was, it's going to be 5 stars because it's just going to be a rollicking good time. There is just some sly humor, some off the cuff stuff in there that just made it so funny. I loved the sarcasm and everything. Now, I do have to say, there is a part of me that still really wants to read this book, and I'm thinking it would be something that I would really enjoy as an audiobook. I think even this, honestly, would be really fun as an audiobook. So I think I might actually read 2 books if I can find one of them on an audiobook. So let me check. Okay, so it's a no on Dinner with King Tut. Let me check this Princess Kills Monsters. Okay, wait, I was wrong. I had only checked Hoopla, and on Hoopla, I couldn't actually get either, but on Libby, I can get both. So I think I'm actually going to read both. I really want to continue with this story today, though, and I want something physical to read. So I think I'm going to, at the very least, start by reading this Princess Kills Monsters, and I'm going to get Dinner with King Tut on audio. And I don't know if I will finish this one in time to like talk about it in this video, because once I'm done with this, I need to start working on some other books that I have on my TBR, and I don't always have a ton of time to listen to audiobooks. So I'm going to hold on to this physical book until I have to return it to the library, which is still a few weeks from now. And I'm going to make my way through the audiobook as well as I can. And then if I get a chance to pick this up and physically read it, I'll hopefully be able to finish it in that format. So I guess the upshot is I'll be able to let you know how the physical and audiobook is of this, and I'm going to read this. So it's my birthday month. I don't know. I don't recall if I mentioned that, but that's why I'm doing this month's video differently, is because I just wanted to read whatever I wanted, see if I could get a 5 star read. I think I might get 2. So I'm excited. I'll come back. I'll let you know how everything went and what I think of both these books, and most importantly, whether or not they were 5 stars. And yeah, see you in a few seconds for you and a few weeks probably for me. Okay, hello. I'm popping back in real quick for an update on This Princess Kills Monsters. I just finished this a couple of days ago now, And this was just as good as I was hoping it was going to be. I have to say, I'm thoroughly satisfied. This is exactly what I want when I read fantasy, something fun, something different, but still with just like a dash of like meaning and important themes going through the midst of it. And that's exactly what this book is. So this was published in 2025. It's written by Herman. And yeah, I have so many interesting things to talk about with this book. It is a fantasy retelling, like I said, of the 12 Huntsmen by I was about to say the Wright brothers. Wow, where did that come from? Definitely not by the Grimm's brothers, is what this is written by. And this is definitely a fairy tale retelling, reimagining, and it's one where it's sort of not only told from a different perspective, but it also has like a different, and I think really takes the idea of gender that is really kind of being played around in the 12 Huntsmen and pushes it a little bit more forward in a lot of different ways. And that's all I'm going to say about that because I don't want to give too many things away that might be plot spoilers. So let me tell you what I think I can share about this book. And that would just be the basic synopsis. This is a story about Melilot, who is the middle sister in a family of sorceresses. And she is the stepdaughter of the fierce sorceress queen. And she's definitely having like those middle sibling vibes. She kind of feels like she's stuck in the middle of everything. She's not the greatest. She's not the baby of the family. She's not full blood member of the family. And she's just finding that is putting her in a very odd place. All she really wants is to be her own person and be able to go her own way and do her own thing and maybe skip a quest here and there. But she suddenly finds herself being forced into an arranged marriage with a foreign unknown prince. And things get even hairier when on her way to her wedding and to meet her future king to be, she is attacked by some spider wolves on the way, and things go on from there, and they just get stranger and stranger and funnier and funnier. Like I mentioned when I tried this book out, it had one of the funniest openings of books that I've read in a while, and honestly, the humor kept going. It was sort of evenly paced throughout, which is understandable because writing something that's going to make you laugh out loud the entire time is hard to do. But I did laugh out loud multiple times throughout this entire book. And then the story in between was really enjoyable and satisfying. This book covered a variety of different topics that some of which I expected and some caught me by surprise and I really enjoyed. It is about family, identity, love, gender, acceptance, and finding yourself and the one that you're meant to be, basically finding your own happily ever after and not having it made for you by someone else or some strange set of coincidences. Except maybe it was, but I was okay with it. I think the things that were most well done in this book, like I've mentioned already, are definitely the humor and just the writing in general. I really liked the way that the author kept elements of the story that already existed in the Grimm story, but really brought them to another level, pushed them in a way that like wasn't leaving the subtleties, but wasn't making things too obvious either. Like, I don't know, it was just really enjoyable. Like, I saw all the elements of the Grimm's Brothers fairy tale in this book, but I think she brought them to life in a different way, and I really liked that. This book is definitely queer coded, but even that makes sense based off of the story that the Grimm's brothers wrote. And yeah, I think I really enjoyed how those two things kind of meshed together, and it didn't feel like she was forcing something into the story that couldn't have possibly been there. I really liked all the universal ideas and themes that were discussed in this book and the way they were handled. I thought they were all subtly in there. I never felt like the author was hammering me over the head with some, I don't know, just idea that the author had that they just insisted that I accept. I felt like it was there for you to consider and that it could apply like it should to just about anyone in any situation in your life. I definitely think this is a fun fairy tale for adults and would recommend it to a lot of people. If there was anything that I didn't like about this book, I would probably just say that at one point it did feel a little too long or a little too slow. I feel like I've been finding that to be a common theme in some of the books I've been reading recently. And it was funny because I was even talking with some people and we were talking about how that also seems to be a problem with books that hit around the 400 page mark, where it's like they just feel a little too long and needed to be shorter. or needed to be developed more so that they could be longer. I don't know. This one definitely felt like it could have been shorter. I felt like the pacing kind of slowed a little bit in the middle of the book, especially given how like interesting a setup we started with and how urgent things seemed to be. I just felt like, I don't know, there was something that it took a little too long to unpack the problems because I feel like the problems were pretty obvious from the get-go. Anyway, would I read this again? Yeah, probably. And since I got it from the library, is this a book that I think I would own? Honestly, yeah, I think I might go and pick up a copy of this, partially because another book in the same, I don't know, I don't think it's a series, but it's another book along the same lines or ideas, comes out this fall, or maybe it's in November, and it is This Night Topples Kingdoms. I think that's the title. I'll put it up on the screen. Yeah, I'm definitely gonna read that. So now I'm like, ooh, I might need to get both of them. Though this one, I think at this point I would have to get in paperback. So I would probably have to wait until that book came out in paperback, but I'm definitely getting the other one from my library because I enjoyed both of these. If you read this book and you want more funny fantasy or just lighthearted and adventurous type of fantasy, I would, as always, recommend The Legend of Ellie Mumpress by Rachel Aaron. This also reminds me of just how funny I found Connie Willis's To Say Nothing of the Dog, even though very different types of fantasy sci-fi going on there. But like the humor is like, I don't know, that's just my kind of humor that I enjoy in books. It's just silly, it's fun, it's a good time. It also reminds me of how much I laughed in 3 Men in a Boat. Though again, the stories are nothing alike, but you know, if you find one of those funny, you will probably find some of the others just as humorous. So that is it for me. Oh no, it's not. What am I talking about? I'm still reading my other book. So the other book, I thought I had it over here somewhere, but apparently I don't. So I'll put a picture on the screen. The other book that I'm still listening to on audiobook is Dinner with King Tut. And the reason I said I think I still have the book over here, I do still have the library book, but that's not over here. But I'm enjoying that so much, I've already bought the paperback. So I was like, yeah, kind of need to do that. My only regret with buying the paperback though is that once I got home and I was really looking through it and looking at the pictures, it occurred to me just a moment too late that if I had have bought a hardcover of the book, the pictures would be slightly larger because they did keep the paperback book in trade paperback size, so it's significantly smaller than the hardcover. So I would recommend, if you listen to Dinner with King Tut, that you get the hardcover edition of it. However, I haven't finished the book, so I don't know what my rating is yet. I'm pretty sure it's going to be a 4 or 5 stars. Did I mention that this was 4.5 stars, but I'm still going to buy it? I probably should give it 5 stars, but I feel like that's not fair because the pacing was a little slow in the middle. Anyway, Dinner with King Tut. I will come back probably, well, definitely a different day because I'm nowhere close to finishing it. I think I'm like 50% of the way through the book, but I'm enjoying the audiobook. I know I will enjoy reading it as well. In fact, I'd probably switch to physically reading it if I didn't have so many other things going on. But that's it for now. Let me stop talking because I don't want to make this whole video for you guys too long. And let me get back to reading and working on things so that I can come back sooner than later and tell you about Dinner with King Tut. All right, I am back for the final check-in. I have finished the final book, which was Dinner with King Tut, and I liked it enough that I can actually hold the book up for you. Now, I did have the library edition of the book. I think I showed that earlier, but as you can see, that was in hardcover. Have I showed this to you yet in this video? I don't know. Anyway, I liked it so much that I went ahead and went out and actually bought myself an edition of the book. I really enjoyed this book. I ended up listening to the entire thing on audiobook, so I can also talk about whether or not I would recommend that. But let me tell you about this book in full. So this was published and came out in 2025. As you can see, it is a PEN America Literary Award finalist, and I can definitely see why. This now makes me wonder what actually won the award that year because I'm amazed it wasn't this book. So my favorite parts about this book, I think, were that it had a lot of quick scenes and the back and forth was like pretty quick. You know, like I said, there were maybe only a few pages that you would read of each section before you would flip back to the other. In the book, it's really nice because you have sort of themed icons that create a page break between the fiction and nonfiction section, and then you'll read on for a few pages, either in the nonfiction where you'll learn more information about that time period, or the fiction section, and then you'll get another page break and you'll switch back to whichever, version you weren't talking about at the time. And while that may seem disruptive, I think it was done really well. I think the breaks in the short story that was being told really kept the tension up and grabbed your attention. And I felt the nonfiction sections gave you just enough information about the different things that were mentioned in the story that you felt like you knew more going back into the story and could appreciate what was happening even more. And yeah, I thought that was a really unique way of doing it and a unique way of talking about a unique field of study. The writing and the pacing of this book were also really well done. I thought it kept moving. It is a rather long book and it's a rather long audiobook. The book itself, I guess it's not that long. It's just over 400 pages, but it would work for Big Book Summer if that's something you're looking for. And I enjoyed it. I never felt like there was a point where it was too long or that I wasn't interested in the history that was being taught or that I didn't like the story. Each of the stories was different in its own way. Some were really inspiring and hopeful, others were sad, and they all felt pretty realistic to the time. If there were any like cons to this book, I would say like there is a, bit of self-promoting like of websites and podcasts of the authors, but I think also maybe rightfully so at points because he did tell you where you could go and see more pictures and that kind of thing. Obviously, there were some limitations of how much information and how many photos and that kind of thing he could put in here. So it was nice to know where to go, but I think maybe it was just mentioned one too many times. I think the saving grace for this book, though, was that it was just the most fun that I've had, maybe ever, in learning about history. And that's saying a lot. It was one of my least favorite subjects throughout school. So for me to even be interested in picking up a non-fiction that is about history and historical events and historical people, I think is saying a lot. But for me to love it is like an even bigger deal for me. I ended up giving this book 5 stars and I think it is well deserved. I would highly recommend it. I think this is a book that pretty much anybody would like and enjoy. I would also recommend the audiobook. I found that because the way each of the stories was structured and that you had like distinct parts that you could listen to and then it would switch back to the other thing, that it was something that was really easy to pick up and put down, but it was so engaging you wanted to keep picking it back up. But that even when I didn't pick it up for a couple of days, I never really felt lost so long as I stopped at one of those sort of page break moments. I think this is a great book for anybody who wants a recap on general world civilization over the course of years and centuries, really. I think if you like archaeology or anthropology, you will find this a really interesting addition just to hear about how people are working hard. And this is like amateurs and professionals in terms of in the field of archaeology, working hard to just discover new things and see if these theories really work out. I think he also makes a really good argument about whether or not it makes sense to not be trying out some of the theories and testing them in real life that are coming up in the field of archaeology. I also think this is a good book for people who are do-it-yourselfers. I don't know that I would recommend that. I think this is also a fun nonfiction introduction. So if you are looking to get more into nonfiction, I think this is a fun way to go just because the fiction sections are going to remind you of fiction and what you get in between is going to take care of those times in books where you sometimes feel like somebody's just giving you an info dump. In this case, like he really is, but it's a fun info dump that you want to hear and he's not trying to pretend that it's part of the story. And also, if you like audiobooks, I thought the audiobook on this was really well done. It was just as entertaining. The only thing you do miss with the audiobook is the pictures. So it was nice to have the physical book on hand so that I could see what ancient Egyptian bread actually looked like when it was put into real molds. And yeah, it was, even if I didn't follow along in the book, it was just nice to be able to come back to the book and see the different pictures and that kind of thing in here. And like I said, even the page breaks, the icons used in that part kind of match up with the theme of that chapter. The things that really stayed with me from this book, and I think that are going to stay with me in the long run, are the details. The idea that what looks like in a museum, just a picture of a room, would have been a room filled with smoke. The idea that a dinner setting that I might see in a museum would smell. The idea that in playing a game, people would have been heavily padded, and so what seems like a really hard ball would not have done as much damage as it could have, and just little things like that. I think even things that weren't mentioned in this book, I'm going to notice now when I go to museum exhibits and see things. I'm going to notice the details in the room and wonder about things like if in the museum exhibit I see that there's like a fireplace in this setting, how much smoke did that create? How much smoke were people living in? What did that make the space smell like? And what did their food taste like? And how long did they spend, hunting and gathering? Because I think sometimes we just take for granted that ancient people were doing these things, but we don't think about the reality of how long that would take or what that would look like, and just what their daily life would actually feel like to live. And I think that book does a great job with it. So that is it. I really enjoyed both the books that I worked on this week. I'm glad I kind of did it this way. I wasn't expecting to have two things since I was kind of going rogue with my own library challenge, but I think that's the best part of the library is you can like check out a whole bunch of stuff and then just choose once you have them all at home. That's kind of what happened here. So I will, per usual, put a receipt on the screen that shows how much it would have cost if I had have bought all of these things and how much I saved by getting them from the library. And the reason I do this is I think it's just a great reminder that if you have a library near you, that it can be really helpful to use it. And I think the other fun part of this challenge is that I'm not necessarily going into my library ahead of time knowing what I want to get there. I mean, sometimes with the like world game, I will, and the countries that I choose from, I will have to pick out ahead of time. But for this, I more or less so just walked into my library and picked out the books that I found that I thought were enjoyable and looked fun. Some of them were off my TBR list. Some of them were just random things that I found while there. So, I know a lot of times people are like, oh, my library doesn't have a lot of different things. Well, try what they do have. You never know what you're going to find. That's the best part of this. And, it saves a lot of money so that you can afford to buy the things that you really want. That's it for me today. Let me know if you've read either of these two books or if you think that some of the ones that I didn't read I'm missing out on, and I'll talk to you next time.